Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everyone. My name is Ahmed Hamdi, and today I'm going to go through a demo for our SQL project. Okay, so let me share the screen. So I'm going to do my demo, SQL demo in Oracle Apex because I found it more flexible and I can use like an app interface of what the main application would be like and how the that the information will be stored in the database. Okay, so let's start. I already created the script and put my code and ran everything and created an application. Okay, so firstly we are going to create the entities that we are going to need, okay, in our project. So for the entities that we are needing, the first one is the community stakeholder, which will store the stakeholder ID, his name, his last name, first name and last name, his gender, email and phone number and address. Okay, so this table belongs to the user, the one who is going to do the tasks. Okay, then we have the carbon consumption data table. This entity is responsible for storing the information given by the user, the stakeholder, okay, such like water consumption, waste consumption, electricity consumption, cooking oil, and those stuff. Okay, also it stores a foreign key of takes the foreign key of the stakeholder ID and the officer ID. Okay, later on we will talk about the officer ID and which entity does it belong to. Okay, and this table has a consumption number as a primary key. Okay, so each consumption inquiry done by the user, he can do one to many. Okay, consumption data he can fill one to many consumption data. Okay, okay, this is the attributes. For water, we have rate factor, then the usage, then the number of days used, and so on. Okay. Next up, we have the carbon emission data entity. This entity will provide the emission footprint. Okay, the emission footprint, as you can see here, for each category, consumption category, like we have here the attribute water, we have water emission, waste emission, electricity emission, cooking oil emission. From every category in the emissions, we produce a footprint, okay? And then we take all of this, add them, and we have the total carbon emission, okay? So next up, we have the MBIP officer admin, okay? This entity combines both the officer, the MPIP officer, and the MPIP admin, okay? We have here the officer ID as a primary key, and we introduced it already in the carbon consumption as a foreign key, okay? We have also the consumption number as a foreign key. For the MP officer admin, we have attributes username, passwords, the officer email, and phone number, okay? And lastly, we have the report entity. The report entity includes like a summarized, finalized data for the user, okay? It includes a primary key report number, the foreign key stakeholder, and the foreign key officer IG, and the report data, which was the report created on, okay? So let's start. Firstly, let me go to the application so it will be much more easier to explain. So firstly, in order for the user to register as a stakeholder, these are the categories that are needed to be filled by the user. Okay, we have here the first name, user last name. Okay, he will fill up first name, then last name, his gender, email, phone number, and address. Okay, once all of this is finished and he clicks create, okay, he clicks on create, what happens is the system inserts into community stakeholder first ID, which is done simultaneously by the system. It will take the first name, last name, the gender, phone number, and address. Please note that in this statement, it is meant that the user didn't click create. Okay, he didn't create because still the email is missing. He created save, so the data that is saved here are only the first name, last name, gender, and phone number and address, but he didn't enter the email. Okay, that's why the statement is like this. And the same for the first, the second, and the third stakeholder. All of them just click the save. Okay, the save option. Okay, so let's and the fourth stakeholder, as you can see here, and this example insert into the system a stakeholder who filled up all of the requirements here and clicked create. Okay, so as you can see here, we filled up like 6 or 7. We had like 20 stakeholders. Okay, 24 actually stakeholders. Okay, later on, as you can see here, for the first and second and third, we did this statement. This statement means that this user had entered this data again, which already was in the system, but the only new information that was given by the system is the email. Okay, as you can see here, update stakeholder with the C1, that's the first stakeholder ID, that's the second, and that's the third. All of these stakeholders has updated their email address in the system. Okay, this is the statement that does that instruction. Okay, and as you can see here, you can also like enter all of your details and click delete. The delete button, as you can see here, this statement uh, emphasize what the delete option will do. Okay, this what will occur inside the database. Delete from community stakeholder, where stakeholder between the ID of the stakeholders between C21 and 24 are being deleted. Okay, everyone between this sequence with this particular ID will be deleted. Okay, so next up, we are going to fill up the consumptions. Okay, now the user will enter his consumption data. So firstly, the user has to provide his wait, carbon consumption data. Yeah, the user must provide his ID and the officer ID. The officer ID doesn't need to be provided here. Okay, as you can see here, the carbon consumption data, we will provide the stakeholder ID, the record ID. I think the officer ID must can be put as the admin can also check on the user consumption data. Okay, so user ID. Oh, okay. I think I made a mistake here. It's not supposed to be the officer ID. Yeah, there's no officer ID attribute here. Okay, so as you can see here, he will enter his ID, stakeholder ID, his recorded data, and then he will enter all of the consumption that he did. Okay, so we have the water. Firstly, he will fill up the water consumption, then and the charge, and then the number of days that he has been using that water in a particular, like 15 to 20, 1 month, 2 month. Okay, then the brew rate will be calculated. Also, you will calculate, give the brew rates, and the usage for electricity will be given here. As you can see here, here's an example. Okay, he have provided all of these details. We have given a few examples of the user giving up this inputs, the consumption data. Okay, so next up, uh, the carbon emission data. Okay, so in the carbon emission data, so we are now going to calculate. Okay, let me go to okay. So that's what happened in the carbon emission data. So firstly, I think we can. Yeah. So firstly, the user will enter his ID. Okay. Once the user enter his ID and clicks create, all of the water and waste and electricity, cooking oil, all of this will be displayed for the user. Okay. As you can see here, here's an example of the user entering his stakeholder ID. And what happens after that is that the system calculates his water, his waste, his electricity consumption accordingly using this particular statement. Okay, update carbon emission data. So what are we doing here is that we setting the water emission for this particular stakeholder C1 with ID C1. We select the usage. He already gave us the input. We select the usage and the rate factor and multiply it by 0.2 from the entity carbon consumption data. Okay, so once we have calculated all of this consumption data, where consumption number is CD1, also CD1 belongs to the first stakeholder. The first stakeholder ID is C1. Okay, that's the example. Here is the water emission. That what happens in water emission, and this is electricity emission. This what happened in electricity emission. Same approach, but we take different attributes. Okay, here we use the usage electricity and the prorate factor for electricity. Okay, and so on. We have here the waste. We do the same procedure. Okay, same statement, different attributes. Also here, we are calculating the cooking oil emission with the attribute oil amount multiplied by 2.5. Okay. After that, we are going to calculate the total emission. So basically what happens here, we take from water consumption, from the carbon consumption emission, we take the water emission, the waste emission, electricity emission, and add them all together. As you can see here, we used this statement, set total carbon emission, select the sum of water emission, waste, electricity, cooking oil emission, sum all this up from the carbon emission data entity, where stakeholder ID is C1, okay? And that's how we calculate the total carbon. After all of that has been calculated, it will be displayed here for the user. Okay, the water emission, the waste emission, the electricity, the cooking oil, and the total of all of them. Okay, that's it for the entity carbon emission. Next up, we have the MBIP office. So how does the admin gets assigned, and what happens in this procedure? So as you can see here, we have provided an example of an admin, 20 admins, I believe. Yeah. So the admin, we have OFA, that's the officer ID. Okay, this is the primary key, CDCCD1. That's the consumption number for this, for the particular user that this admin has been assigned to. Okay, so firstly, the admin will enter his consumption number that he has been assigned to, his username, his password, his officer email, and phone number. Okay, here's an example of that, as you can see here. Okay, the officer. This is the officer ID. This is the consumption number that he has been assigned to. The name, his username. Okay, this is the password, email, and phone number. Okay, so lastly we have the report. So how does the report happen? What occurs in the report? So for the report, we enter the stakeholder ID and officer ID, okay, the officer ID, and the date which this report has been created. And by doing that, we have created a report. Here's an example of what occurs inside the system. Uh, the report ID, the report number, primary key, the stakeholder ID, officer ID, and the system data, the date which the report has been created. Okay, so after finishing all of that, okay, that's all about the system. Let's go through let's see what's a list and all of that. Okay, so for doing so, we have here, in order to display all of that, we use this statement. Okay, we use this statement. So what this statement does, okay, let's go line by line. Okay, firstly, we select the report number, the date, and the stakeholder ID from the report entity, as you can see here. Next up, we also need to select the total. We want to display the report number. And basically what's in the report is the number, the report number, the dates, the stakeholder ID, each stakeholder ID, and their total carbon emission, okay? And the total carbon emission we get from the entity carbon emission data. Okay, so in order to do this particular thing, in order to display what I said, this statement, okay, select from report this attributes and select total carbon emission from carbon emission data. Okay, that's the entity. So from report, then we are going to use join because we have a different attribution here from a different entity. Okay, so join carbon emission data on report stakeholder. I want to now set that the entity and stakeholder where the entity stakeholder ID, okay, from report is equal to the stakeholder ID from carbon emission data. Okay, we can remove this one. We can later on. Okay, so now we will display all of the stakeholder IDs and their report, okay? The one who are in the report and their total carbon emission. Yes, okay, as you can see here, we have displayed 4 columns, okay? The first one is the report number, and the second one is the date which the report has been created. As you can see, I've created this today. So it's 01, 21, 24, okay? And we have the stakeholder ID. This is the first stakeholder, the second, the third, and so on. And this is the total carbon emission for each one of them. Okay, as you can see here. And that's it for the report. Okay, so let's say we wanna display all of the rows and the carbon emission data. Okay, I mean the carbon emission data. I don't think that's okay. Yeah. Okay. So what happens here? For each stakeholder, as you can see here, here are all of the stakeholders, and each of them, it will display the water emission for that specific stakeholder, the waste, electricity, cooking oil. Is in more details and so on. Okay. Thank you very much. That was it for our SQL MPIP monitoring and management system. Thank you very much.